I'm back. Hi, this is Dana again, and this is the next section of this module where I'm going to talk about nonprofit programming. Now, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm kind of a dork when it comes to nonprofits. I really love nonprofit work and strategy and planning and evaluation. So I have all kinds of books in my personal library about nonprofits, how to run them, how to, evaluate them, everything about nonprofits and fundraising and grant seeking. Here is a pet peeve of mine. Most of the books that I have on nonprofit management or development or anything about nonprofits, they completely skip over programming. Nonprofit programming is like that whole purpose of the organization existing. And so all of these books that I've used, even for other classes, they talk about board management and fundraising, personnel, facilities, insurance, and risk management. They talk about all of these things, but they completely just gloss over. They just totally skip programming, which is really the heart and soul of the organization. Without the programming, you can't achieve your mission and you can't ever move toward your vision. So to me, nonprofit programming is truly the heart of the nonprofit. Everything else just supports that. And I think it's really important to talk about. So I am doing that here. So let's get started. Nonprofit programming. There are different elements of nonprofit programming that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the program design, program management, and program evaluation. So program design is if you're creating a brand new program and you need to design it and you need to do it right. Now, if you work in nonprofits, you will be involved in program design, whether it is an established nonprofit that's just creating a new program, or if it's a new nonprofit that is just creating a program from scratch. So it really doesn't matter if it's a new nonprofit or an established. You may be involved in program design. Regardless, if you work for a nonprofit, you are going to be involved at some level in program management, whether you are the person in charge of that program or you work within that program or you work in the finance office or administration, whatever it is, you are going to be involved in managing those programs. And then program evaluation is just how the organization measures the quality of the work that they're doing. All right, so what is programming? I've kind of already said this, but here is a definition. A definition, that sounds like something that might be on a quiz. The programming is defined as formalized activities and assets through which your organization achieves its mission. Formalized, all right, so it doesn't mean they just kind of do it off the cuff. It's formalized. And it includes activities and assets. So here is where the program fits in. If here's your problem, here is your program, and then here is the future state. You have no food in the house. Your program is to go grocery shopping. The future state is you have food in your house, right? It makes perfect sense. It's not that complex. So here's an example of a program that has been being developed. And I'm going to use this example, and I just realized after my last video that my microphone is way over here. So go ahead and turn it down now because I'm going to move my microphone closer in front of me. All right, here is the example of the formalized activities and assets through which your organization achieves its mission. Here is the problem. Our community has too many stray dogs because owners cannot afford to have them spayed or neutered. Every year, 1,500 dogs are euthanized by the city. Now, I totally made that up, but it's feasible that could be a problem. So what kind of program could we have that might fix that program or fix that problem? A free mobile spay or neuter program. And then here is our future state is our city shelter will become a no-kill shelter because there will not be an overpopulation of dogs. Make sense? Of course it does. So program design. Remember we talked about there are those three elements: program design, program management, and program evaluation. So right now we're talking about program design. This is a diagram that I created, and it's based on a lot of other research that's out there about nonprofit success, nonprofit management. I use this when I work with nonprofits to identify areas of weakness or strategies that they need to work on for the organization. There are a lot of organizations that focus only on their mission. So you see the mission is up there at the very top of the pyramid. They want to focus on that and make that the basis of everything that they do instead of the pinnacle of everything that they do. So what ends up happening is maybe they only focus on those top three parts of the pyramid: their programs, their outcomes, and their mission. And what happens is that they don't have all of these other areas supporting those things. So think about a pyramid that's turned over on its point. If you turn a pyramid upside down, it is not very stable. It wobbles a lot. And I do see organizations that are wobbly because all they think about is their mission without thinking about all of the things that have to support the mission. And I tell you all of this so that you realize, as we are going through, I am talking about programming, but there are other parts of nonprofit operations that are very important, including governance and strategic planning. That really is the foundation of nonprofit success. Organizational best practices, staff and volunteers, partners and public relations, fundraising. All of those elements support programs, outcomes, mission to the exploding out of the top was achieving the vision. And this has been an image that has been really helpful for my nonprofit clients to understand the importance of doing all of these things. I also have clients, though, that really focus mostly on fundraising and partners, what I've called the external elements, and they don't really focus that much on their programs because sometimes they think that the programs will just take care of themselves if they do the fundraising and public relations. To a certain extent, maybe that's true, but they kind of forget about some of the rest of it. So there are different organizations that have different strengths, and that's going to depend where they spend a lot of their time on this pyramid. But what I want you to understand is that all of it is important. All right, so now let's talk about what is a program. We've talked about this before. Here's the definition: the formalized activities and assets through which your organization achieves its mission and moves toward its vision. The program works to solve a problem or fill a gap that has been identified. Okay, you don't start a program without identifying what problem you want to solve. Otherwise, that's putting the cart before the horse. So let's go ahead and take this example a little bit further. Let's say that you are someone, and I know there are several of you in this class, based on your introductions of yourselves, who just really have a heart for animals and pets. So let's imagine that you see this news item on the TV news or on the internet, is that the City Dog Pound reported that in 2021, they were forced to euthanize nearly 1,500 healthy dogs that could not be placed in homes. And let's say this just really fires you up and you think, I have got to do something to fix this issue in our city. There's no reason that this should happen. And then you think, why are there so many dogs that have to die? And isn't anybody doing anything about this? and there has to be an answer to it, and I'm going to find it. So most people who start a nonprofit kind of have this passionate moment where it really touches their heart or makes them angry in some way, and they decide that they are going to put their time and energy and talents into fixing a problem. So let's keep using this example. Here is what you might do if you are that person who sees that news item and you decide that you want to fix this problem. The first thing you would probably want to do is conduct some research. So maybe talk to the director of the dog pound, and they will tell you, gosh, we really hate having to euthanize these healthy animals, but we run out of room at least twice a month. Most of the strays that we pick up come from the poorest neighborhoods in town, and the people there, a lot of times they just don't have the money to spay and neuter their animals, and so their animals obviously have babies, and those babies run wild, and it's very sad. Then you might want to call and talk to several rescue groups. And any community probably has several animal rescue organizations. And they usually will say, we're always full of dogs that we're trying to place into homes, and we just don't have the capacity for more. Really, the best solution to the problem would be to reduce the number of puppies that are being born. And let's say you go talk to your family vet, and they say, it costs my practice about $125 to spay a female or about $50 to neuter a male, and I can't afford to do the work for free. Vets, I've actually got a friend who's a vet, and I never realized they operate on a very tight margin. They don't make a huge profit on things. So it's really hard for them to give away their services, even though most of them do give away services quite a bit. But it's really hard for them to make a profit. And so, but let's say the vet does say, I would love to volunteer every once in a while to do some things for free though. So then maybe you do research on the internet and you find out which cities have been effective at reducing the stray pet population. And I just completely made these cities up. But you might do the research and you go, okay, which cities did a good job and how did they do it? And then identify those 3 cities. Indianapolis, Indiana, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Drexel, New York. And again, I just pulled those out of thin air. So then, and my little box is hiding the word there, but talk to the professionals in those cities. Pick up the phone and call them or send them an email and say, hey, we are really looking to, or I am really looking to do something very similar here in my town. What did you guys do? How did you successfully achieve the goal of being a zero kill shelter or dog pound? Tell me what you did. And people are usually pretty proud of what they've done, and they don't mind talking to you and kind of patting themselves on the back and talking about all of the trouble that they had and all the successes that they had and how they worked through different things and how they raised money and how they did everything. That is a treasure trove for you, no matter what area of nonprofit or services you're wanting to provide. Talk to people who've done it successfully, and you will get a lot of information. So what were the findings of all of this research that you did? Well, the best way to reduce the number of strays is to increase spay and neutering of animals, particularly for those households who have barriers to getting their dogs fixed. So it might be money, it might be ignorance, it might be transportation issues. I know that affects a lot of people, that maybe there are free services for them, but they would have to drive across town to do it, and they don't have reliable transportation that would allow them to do that. So that's a lot of times that is a significant barrier for folks. So how would this happen? Well, and you could just guess this off the top of your head, we could offer a free mobile unit that provides services within those neighborhoods where they are most needed. we would have to advertise the services and educate people on how important it is to spay and neuter their dogs. Okay, that's how we would do that. And then you've got to ask yourself, so now what? How do I start? What I will I will tell you that doing a mind map like this stresses me out because I am a very linear thinker. Over my life, I have come to learn that not everybody thinks the same way that I do. Different people's brains work different ways. So I have actually worked with clients and discovered that sometimes if they just sit down and draw out what they want to do, and it not be linear, that they are able to get there. And then I can take what they've done and create a plan that is linear and makes sense and isn't just all over the place. Oh, sorry. And but this is a really good way to map out what you want to do if you feel like it helps you. So I drew this out, and afterward, once I scanned it and entered it into this, I realized that it kind of looks like a little pile of dog poo sitting there in the middle, and I did not mean for that to look like that. I meant for it to look like a cloud, because this is just my mind thinking. But anyway, it just kind of cracked me up. But you kind of put that at the middle, and then you sort of draw out everything that you might want to do. So if you want to protect dogs by reducing strays, you might want to do a free spay and neuter mobile unit. What else would you need to do? You need to determine barriers. You need to educate owners. You need to raise money. You need to find partners. You need to get attention. And just sort of draw out all of those different things that you would need to do and how you would do them. Again, if your mind thinks more non-linearly, it might be an easier way for you to plan. So let's take it back to being linear and see how this person might actually, once they've done the mind map, how they might identify the formalized activities. Because remember, the definition of a program is formalized activities and assets. So what would be the formalized activities? You've got all of these here: education, advertising services, scheduling appointments, doing procedures, following up a week later, and tracking daily population at the city shelter. And then assets, so this would just be the stuff that you need. People, you might need vets, vet techs, an administrator, volunteers. You would need that mobile unit, whether that's a van or just equipment that you move from place to place. And then, of course, you'd have to have money to pay for everything, right? So as you look at this, what would you think a good mission statement for this organization would be? What about the vision statement? What do you think would be a good vision statement for this organization? Think about it, because, gosh, it might be an assignment. All right. Program development starts with planning. This is so important. A lot of people will just start offering services without really doing any planning. And it's not because they have failed necessarily. The way a lot of nonprofits start is that somebody who has just a huge heart sees a problem and they just start fixing it. And after a while, they get more people involved in it who also want to help them fix it. And then they realize that they probably should start a nonprofit. So they start a nonprofit and they start raising money. And then they realize they've never even done a written plan of what their programs look like. They've never even defined what it is that they do. They've just been doing it for so long that it feels natural. That happens a lot. And it doesn't mean their programs are bad, but it usually means their programs are kind of all over the place because they haven't done a good job planning them. So program development needs to start with planning. And even if somebody's done something for years, I will usually ask them to take a few steps back, imagine that they were starting over from the beginning and looking to solve this problem. How would they develop this program? So obviously it starts with the problem statement, which is something we've already talked about. You describe the problem as specifically as possible. Now, make sure that you're using data that's provided by reliable sources, not just your own gut feelings, okay? Does somebody else think this is a problem? I do talk to people who want to start a nonprofit because they think that something is a problem or they feel like something is a problem, but they don't have any data to back that up. Now, if you want to just be a good person and volunteer and do things because you have a gut feeling that you need to, more power to you. That's lovely. If you want to start a formal program to address it, you've got to have data and you've got to prove that the problem you're trying to solve is actually a problem. So then you need to do community needs assessment or a market analysis. So who's going to be served? Who exactly are they? Who else, and this is one that a lot of people skip, who else in the community is providing this service already or a related service? And how would you be different? I talk to a lot of people who want to start or do start an animal rescue. And so I ask them, well, how many other animal rescue organizations do you know or have you worked with? What I typically find out is that they have worked with a couple of other animal rescues and they just don't like the way that they work, and so they start their own. And to be honest, I understand where they're coming from, but that's not a good reason to start a nonprofit, just because you don't like how somebody else is doing it. So it's important to think about and do that. What is the scale of what you are proposing? The scale of what you're proposing is very important. Are you wanting to be a worldwide organization, or are you going to serve a certain neighborhood? You need to have an idea of the scale of what you want to do. And it's okay to change that over time. Maybe you're going to focus on a neighborhood and then over time you're going to grow. But you need to define that. The desired state, so describe what you hope to accomplish. And that ties directly back to your mission and vision, right? Strategies and activities. Be as specific as you can. Imagine that you are someone who's being served by the organization. How would you find out about it? How would you get involved? What exactly would happen? And what outcomes would you experience? What are your goals and objectives? What are your outcomes? What assets are you going to need to accomplish that? Both volunteer and paid positions. What kind of people are you going to need? What kinds of expertise do they need to have? Because obviously you cannot have a CPA, an accountant, or a bookkeeper be the person who is doing the spaying and neutering of these dogs. You've got to have somebody who knows how to do spay and neuter, a vet, to do that. So that's that expertise that you're going to need. Budget. How much money do you think you're going to need the first year? Second year? How is that? Where's all the money going to, what's it going to buy? And then where's the money going to come from? You can't just say, if I build it, they will, somebody will pay for it. You have got to have a strategy for finding the people who are going to help you pay for what you're doing. And don't fool yourself into thinking you're just going to get grants, because you're not. Grants come, you probably need to be an organization that's about 5 years old before you start getting grants. And then, of course, the timeline. Identify all those key tasks and set a deadline. Now, I created this program planning template. It's really just kind of a worksheet. I based it off of the Kellogg model for a logic model, the reading that you did. In a later chapter, you'll see a template that looks somewhat like this. Frankly, I didn't really like their template. I think it's a little bit too academic and talking about, what's our theory of change and all of that. Most nonprofit people don't really care about being that academic. I think it's more important to show, let's just get something done. So this talks about all of those things that we just discussed. What's your problem statement? What's the market analysis? What's your desired state? Strategies, assets, budget, and timeline. Feel free to use this if you need it at any time. But I did fill it out for our pretend spay and neuter mobile clinic. So I've got the problem statement here. According to the city, it must euthanize 1,500 dogs each year. Most strays come from poorer neighborhoods in town and have not been spayed or neutered. The market analysis. There's at least 15 rescue organizations in town, but none of them spay or neuter. Most of them are at capacity and can't take more dogs. Vets' offices can perform the surgery, but they can't afford to do it for free. And there are several cities in the nation who have gone to a no-kill because they have been able to reduce the stray population. The best model seems to be a free mobile clinic that goes into targeted neighborhoods. So the desired state here is that the city pound will attain a no-kill status by 2025 because they will not be overrun with dogs. Here's the strategies and activities. Target audiences, or educate the target audiences about the importance of fixing their dogs, provide a free service for spay and neuter, eliminate transportation barriers by offering a mobile clinic, and make it the norm. Make it just the default for people to spay and neuter their dogs so that people just never hesitate. It's just, they know that it's just the thing that they need to do. What kind of assets are needed? People and things. Maybe a marketing person, an administrator, a fundraiser, program organizers, vets who will volunteer, and board members. Now, to be honest, you might have one person who is serving as the marketing person, administrator, fundraiser, and program organizer. It's just they're going to be doing all of those different things. So this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a separate person doing all of those, but those are the tasks that you're going to need. You're also going to have to get a mobile spay and neuter clinic, maybe a van or just equipment that can be taken around. What's the budget? To start, you're going to need $45,000, $3,000 for marketing and education. Staff will have to all be volunteer until you can raise more money. Like, as you can see here, this is a very thumbnail budget. This is not a great deal of analysis. It's really just thinking through what you need. The timeline, and I do have some activities and a timeline written out there of how you would get this going. It would have April 2023 as when launching the free clinic and then collecting the data. So it's making sure there's plenty of time. It's not saying we're going to start doing spay and neutering in 2 months. It's saying we're going to take our time, we're going to build this program the right way, and we're going to give ourselves enough time to get it done. Now, logic model. Hopefully you've already read through chapter 1 of that Kellogg Foundation document about logic models. Logic models do strike fear into the heart of nonprofit professionals everywhere because most of the time they overthink them. And logic models are just sort of like everything else. They can be as difficult or as simple as you need them to be. The categories are really the same. It's inputs, meaning what do you need to get everything done? Activities, these are your programs. Your outputs, these are your results. How many dogs did you spay or neuter? How many people did you reach? It's those numbers of things that you did, the activities that you did. The outcomes, though, are the measurable results. And the impact is sort of like your vision or your mission. It's how did the world change because of what you did. That's really everything that needs to be in a logic model. I have to build logic models all the time for grants, for federal grants, state grants, even foundation grants. I've gotten to where they're really not that difficult, but it is interesting that a lot of times they different organizations or different funders will have different ideas of what should be in a logic model. So there really is not any kind of official requirements for logic models because you see all kinds of different things. I see some logic models that have problem statements in them and assumptions in them. So there are all kinds of different things, but this, what you've got here, is the most basic. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. If you are not afraid of a logic model, you will be considered a rock star in the nonprofit world. All right, Now we're going to talk about nonprofit program management, right? We just finished talking about program development. Now we're talking about program management. And this is, I found a great definition from the Georgia Center for Nonprofits. Program management is an ongoing, systematic process that nonprofit professionals follow as they plan, implement, and evaluate an initiative, which really they mean a program. They probably just didn't want to say program again. So plan, implement, and evaluate a program. So here are the elements of program management. Yes, write these down, keep them, know them. 1, community engagement and communications. 2, budget and tracking costs. 3, asset management, people and stuff, right? 4, delivery of service, logistics and tools needed. Delivery of service, consistency. Delivery of service, getting feedback. And evaluation, collecting the right data. I'm going to let you look at those for a minute. All right, community engagement and communications. My background is public relations and communications, so I always sort of default. The easiest thing for me to do is to default to that, so I typically put that first. But it's identifying who are your audiences for any given program. So let's go back to the spay and neuter clinic. Who would be the internal, I use my hands too much, internal and external audiences for that kind of endeavor? Making a list of all of those and then identifying what are you going to do for each of them. So you've got internal audiences and external audiences. So internally, it's board members, volunteers, and staff. Externally, it's donors, prospective donors, potential volunteers, clients, partner organizations, and the general public. You may have, and this is just what I put down for this type of organization. You might have other categories when you think through who are the internal and external audiences and what is it that you need to communicate? What is it that they need to know or that you need them to know about your organization, about your program? Then you want to look at budgeting. You need to create an annual budget. You need to maintain records. And then decide how that's going to be done. Are you going to have a bookkeeper who's going to keep everything for you? Or are you going to use software? You want to review your budget every month. Look at the profit and loss statement. So that's sort of like your check register, right? What money did you spend this month? How close are you to your actual budget? Is there anything that you need to adjust? You want to project any changes and as far ahead as possible. Maybe you thought that you were going to buy a van for your mobile clinic, and then you decided you didn't really need a van because you had enough churches and parks and other places where people said you could use their facilities, and so you don't really need a van. You just need some really good boxes to put in somebody's car so that they can just take it to the site and set it all up. That's going to change your budget significantly. So, but project those changes as well as you can and as far ahead as you can so that you can adjust your budget as you need to, and then make notes for future budget years. Asset management. So this is all of that stuff that you have. You need to develop your inventory list, find a way to manage your inventory, make sure you have insurance and loss prevention. You need to have policies and procedures about caring for supplies and equipment. You need to have human resources, policies and procedures, and training. You need to have open communication with volunteers and staff and set performance goals and review them regularly. Now, service delivery, tools, and logistics. Now, a lot of these different activities cross over with each other. None of them just really stands alone. They all interact, but I've broken these out as well as I can. And what I'll tell you is when I have each one of these 6 different areas, if I were running a program, I would probably have a notebook where I had a tab for each one of these and a plan for each one of these and I would track my progress in each one of them and make notes on everything. So that's why I'm presenting them like this. It's really a really great way to manage what you're doing. So service delivery, tools, and logistics. So all of the equipment and supplies that are needed, and so you're going to link that obviously to your budget and your asset management. Talk about what tools are needed. Do you need software, printed materials, and so forth? Then, what is the typical pathway of services? You want to build a diagram of how someone would move through your program. How would they first learn about the program? How would they be approached? How would they get connected with your organization? What kind of information would they receive? When would they be followed up with? Just really everything, start to finish. What does that look like? And then where are you seeing errors? Where are you seeing pain points in the service pathway? And then work to eliminate those. You're also going to, good management of a program means that what's delivered is consistent, okay? There might be a little bit of variation here and there, but it doesn't just bounce up and down. So you want to determine the boundaries of consistency. So really what that means is you want to say we will schedule a spay and neuter within 3 weeks of the first call that we get from somebody, something like that. So you have a way of measuring performance. You want to monitor your average outcomes and see, are the results consistent? Because remember, you don't want a whole lot of variables. And if they're not consistent, determine the problem and find a solution, and then tie it all to evaluation. Service delivery feedback. In terms of getting feedback and evaluation, who are you going to get feedback from? Clients and volunteers. What do you want to know? How often will you collect that feedback, and what's the time frame, and how are you going to keep track of all of that data? Also, how are you going to present that data? Are you just going to do an annual report once a year? Are you going to do monthly reports, monthly kind of short newsletter reports? Or are you going to do something, a lot of nonprofits are actually going to doing a dashboard on their website, so they keep everything updated in real time. How are you going to manage all of that? And then 7, evaluation. You've got to do evaluation, or you don't even bother getting started. Because if you don't evaluate what you're doing, how can you prove that they work? Nobody cares that you feel like it works. They want to see that it works. There are 2 ways to evaluate a program. You have normative, normative measures and outcome measures. So normative measures are, did you complete the tasks on time? And it's like checking a box. Versus an outcome measure is, did you make a change? So this is data and numbers. So one is not necessarily better than the other, but the outcome measures tend to pack more of a punch. That seems to be what people are more interested in than the normative measures. So let's talk a little bit more about program evaluation. And this is either for new programs or for existing programs. The thing I want you to remember more than anything else is that outputs does not equal impact. If you'll remember there on the logic model that we looked at before, outputs were like the number of people served, number of events, number of programs, and so forth. Your outputs are not your impact. Activity does not equal success. And there are very large nonprofits who still don't get this. I talk to nonprofits who will say, oh, well, we handed out 4,000 meals last year. And so then I'll ask, well, so what? What change did that make? I mean, maybe you fed somebody for a day or for one meal, 1/3 of a day, but did it really make a change in the world? Were they healthy meals? Did you connect people to sources for future meals? Did the people actually eat the meals, or did they throw them out because they weren't very good? And unless you can show that actually had an impact, it really doesn't matter. I also have had organizations that say, well, we offered 200 courses last year on, I don't know, family dynamics or something like that. Well, you know, were those classes, were they any good? Did anyone attend? So just because you held a class doesn't mean anybody came. Did anyone learn anything? And did it change their behavior? I mean, you could have a really crappy class and offer it every day for a full year. It's not going to really matter. And so don't confuse activities with success. So you want to use evaluation tools, and you want to start, before you even start your program, you want to know how you're going to evaluate it so that you can be collecting data all along the way. So here are some possible things that you might want to track. Increase of knowledge after training. You would do a pre-test and a post-test and find out what they learned, or did their attitude change. Maybe, and this could be surveys, surveys that ask people if they change their attitude about spaying and neutering. And then you could do quantitative increases or decreases. So this is what I have for that no-kill shelter, for that mobile spay and neuter. It would be, 2021, we know that there were 1,500 euthanized pets, so that by 2025, a no-kill status is achieved. That shows impact. That shows that they are, especially by year 3, if they are on track, people are going to jump on board and they're going to see that this is a really important program, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier to raise money and get people involved if they're showing that they are making an impact. So let's review what we've talked about for the last 41 and a half minutes. Programs are how nonprofits achieve their mission and vision. New programs can be developed for new organizations or for existing ones. Programs solve an identified problem. Program development requires research. Remember, we talked about doing all of that research, talking to different people, looking up data, looking up statistics. Program development also requires planning. So we talked about mind maps, we talked about that program planning template, and we talked about logic models. Programs do have to be managed at all times. Remember, we talked about those 7 areas of management, and then programs do have to be evaluated regularly, and those could be normative evaluations and outcome evaluations. And here is another thing that really kind of, when I bring this up to my clients, a lot of times they feel like, they act like I'm a complete radical for throwing this out. A lot of times I'll ask them, well, wouldn't success look like you have to close your doors because that problem that you were trying to solve is gone? And they're like, close our doors? We'll never close our doors. I guess I always think, well, if you're there to solve a problem, then it seems like your vision would be having to close your doors because you aren't needed anymore. That's like the pinnacle of success, is that you are no longer needed. But it's something I think that you should always keep in mind when you're developing a program, is that it's okay to say that you're going to shut the program down when it's no longer needed. And I think that's all I've got for you guys. So I know I covered an awful lot in this module. So study, read through everything, look through the slides again, watch the video again if you need to, speed it up to double time because then I talk a lot faster. Make sure that you cover everything, and let me know if you have questions. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.